What if I told you the most important thing the Dallas Cowboys did this week barely made a sound? While the rest of the football world was still debating Micah Parsons' contract drama, still dissecting the Dak Prescott situation, still screaming into the void about everything that went wrong in 2025, the Cowboys front office was doing something far more interesting. They were quietly building, piece by piece, move by move, name by name, adding players who won't dominate your timeline, but absolutely will show up on your television screen when the 2026 season kicks off and this defense starts making quarterbacks genuinely uncomfortable. A safety from Oregon with combined numbers that make any quarterback in the NFC East uneasy just reading them on paper. A linebacker carrying a last name so loaded with rivalry history that Cowboys Nation is already splitting right down the middle over whether to embrace him or run in the other direction. A veteran defensive lineman who signed with Dallas for a personal reason nobody saw coming, and whose story completely reframes how you read this contract. And a cornerback the rest of the market completely slept on, a player analysts are now calling the single smartest under-the-radar move of the entire 2026 free agency period. Not just in the NFC, not just in the conference, the entire league. This rebuild is happening right now, and it is bigger, bolder, and more deliberate than it looked from the outside. Stay locked in, because by the time we're done breaking this down, you're going to see exactly why. So before we break this all down, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because if you're a Cowboys fan, this is exactly where you want to be. Let's start with the foundation of the problem, because you cannot understand why these moves matter without first understanding how broken this defense was in 2025. The Cowboys finished the season ranked among the worst defenses in football at preventing explosive plays. That is the category that kills you in January. Not yards per game, not total sacks, explosive plays. The 20-plus yard chunk gains that shift momentum, flip field position, and demoralize a fan base quarter by quarter. And the root cause, the thing that kept getting buried under all the noise about the offensive line and the quarterback situation, was the absence of a true center field safety. The kind of player who patrols the back end of a defense like he owns it. The kind who makes quarterbacks hesitate on deep shots because they absolutely know that there is someone back there who can erase a mistake in an instant. A player who communicates, who adjusts, who eliminates the free throws that defenses like Dallas were giving up on a weekly basis all last season. Jalen Thompson arrived this offseason on a 3-year, $33 million deal, and he is a legitimate upgrade. Solid, physical, experienced. P.J. Locke adds real depth at the position. Malik Hooker is still on the roster and brings his own value. But none of those three, not one of them, is that center field eraser. That alpha safety who changes how an entire offense prepares for a Cowboys game. That role is still open. And that is exactly where Dylan Theismann from the University of Oregon walks into this conversation and immediately refuses to leave. Theismann is not a new name for anyone who has spent serious time following this draft cycle. He has been building toward this moment for years, and the tape tells a story that the numbers confirm rather than contradict. He broke onto the scene at Purdue as a true freshman, earned All-American honors, and was named Big Ten Freshman of the Year before he had even experienced a full college season. Then he made the move to Oregon, one of the most talent-rich programs in the country, stepped into a starting role without missing a beat, and proceeded to start 32 consecutive games. 32 straight. That kind of consecutive start streak at the college level does not happen by accident. It tells you about durability, about football character, and about a player his coaches trust without hesitation when the lights are on and the game is real. Then came the combine. And if you were watching when Theismann ran his 40, you probably did exactly what I did. You checked the number twice, looked around to see if anyone else noticed, and then checked it a third time. A 4.3540 at 6 feet tall and 201 pounds. Let that settle for just a second. That is not safety speed. That is wide receiver speed attached to a player built to hit like a linebacker. That single number changes the entire conversation around how you could deploy him. It changes the route combinations offenses can run in his direction. It changes whether a coordinator can call a vertical concept against single high coverage with him rotating over the top. At 4.35, the answer to that question is almost never. You simply cannot outrun him on a go route if he gets a proper drop, and his footwork ensures he almost always does. What the 40 does not tell you, and what you absolutely have to watch the tape to understand, is how his brain processes information at full speed. Tysman reads quarterbacks the way elite defensive backs read quarterbacks. He is not reacting to the ball in the air. He is reacting to the quarterback's eyes, his hips, his release point, the subtle telegraphing that separates accurate passers from great ones. By the time a receiver realizes a ball is coming their way, Tysman is already arriving. Not because he guessed, because he knew. His hip fluidity in transition is genuinely special. That backpedal to break conversion, the moment where a safety has to flip from retreating to attacking, is where most prospects lose a full step. Tysman loses nothing. He plants, redirects, and accelerates as if the change of direction was the plan all along. His ball skills in contested situations are elite. 8 interceptions over his college career, paired with 306 total tackles. When the ball is in the air and Tysman is anywhere near it, you feel more confident about the outcome than you probably should for a player who has not yet taken an NFL snap. There's also an edge to his game that his clean, technically sound style can occasionally disguise. He is a willing and physical tackler. He does not just arrive and wrap. He delivers a message with every contact. In a league where big play safeties can become soft in run support over time, that physicality matters enormously for Brian Schottenheimer's defense. His versatility is real and it is broad. He can play deep, he can roll into a box alignment, and he can blitz with genuine effect off the edge. Christian Parker, the new defensive coordinator in Dallas, is building an unpredictable, multiple-scheme defense that demands exactly this kind of versatility from its back end. A player who forces opposing offensive coordinators to account for him in multiple ways before the ball is even snapped is an invaluable chess piece in that kind of system. Are there concerns? Yes, and being honest about them is part of taking this evaluation seriously. His size makes him a potential liability against tight ends and bigger blocking backs when he is asked to come downhill against power. His aggressive style, which is largely a strength, can leave him exposed against double move from shifty receivers who recognize and exploit it. Those are legitimate NFL evaluation points. But the overall picture is a player who directly addresses the single biggest weakness this defense carried into 2025 and who projects as a starter from his first training camp. Projected as a mid to late first-round pick, he would step into the Cowboys' rotation immediately and change how Dallas defends the deep part of the field. If the goal is to stop bleeding on explosive plays at the most critical moments in games, this is the name that needs to be at the top of the conversation. Now let's talk about a name that hit the Cowboys' radar this week and will trigger a very specific reaction depending on how long you have been watching this rivalry. Josiah Trotter, linebacker out of Missouri, scheduled a top 30 visit to Dallas this week. Go ahead and sit with that for a moment, because I know exactly what half of you just felt when you read that last name, and I know exactly what the other half is about to feel when we break down who this family is and what it represents in the entire history of this franchise's fiercest rivalry. Jeremiah Trotter Sr. spent the best years of his career terrorizing Cowboys offenses from the middle of the Philadelphia Eagles defense. 4 Pro Bowl selections, multiple All-Pro honors, a place in the Eagles franchise Hall of Fame. He was not just a good player for Philadelphia. He was a symbol of the rivalry itself. A player Cowboys fans spent years trying to scheme around and largely failed to neutralize. Then Jeremiah Trotter Jr. entered the league in 2024, was drafted by the Eagles, and proceeded to win a Super Bowl as a rookie while establishing himself as the anchor of Philadelphia's defense heading into what promises to be a sustained run at the top of the NFC. Now the third member of the family, Josiah, is visiting Dallas for a top 30 pre-draft evaluation. If the Cowboys draft Josiah Trotter, you will have a Trotter on each side of the most intense rivalry in the NFC East at the same time. I'm not going to tell you that family history defines whether you draft a football player. It absolutely does not. What I'm telling you is that the story carries genuine weight and deserves acknowledgement before we get to the football evaluation, because skipping past it would be dishonest about what makes this particular situation so uniquely compelling for this fan base. Josiah's individual football story is one of resilience before it is one of production, and that context matters enormously for how you interpret what he has actually accomplished. He signed with West Virginia in 2022 out of high school, with legitimate linebacker prospect buzz around him. Then he suffered an ACL tear in spring practice in 2023 before he had played a meaningful college snap. That kind of injury at that age, before you have proven a single thing at the college level, ends the careers of players who lack the mental and physical constitution to come back from it fully. Josiah Trotter came back fully. When he returned in 2024, he did not ease back into action. He stepped directly into the starting lineup and delivered 92 tackles for loss, 1 interception, and Big 12 Defensive Freshman of the Year honors. No adjustment period. No warm-up games. Immediate, tangible production in his first active season, on a defense competing in one of the most physical conferences in college football. That alone would have been enough to earn serious draft attention. Then he transferred to Missouri and stepped up in class to the SEC, which is a fundamentally different environment from the Big 12 in terms of the size, athleticism, and scheme complexity he would face at the line of scrimmage every single week. In 2025 at Missouri, he recorded 84 tackles, 13 tackles for loss, 2.0 sacks, and earned first-team All-SEC recognition. Over 2 seasons as a starter at 2 different programs in 2 different power conferences, he totaled 176 tackles and 2.5 sacks. More importantly, he demonstrated the ability to adapt, to absorb a new scheme, integrate with new teammates and a new coaching staff, and perform immediately at a first-team level in both environments. That adaptability is not a minor footnote in his evaluation. It is one of the most important traits you can identify in a college linebacker transitioning to the complexity of an NFL defensive system. The Cowboys linebacker room makes this visit make complete sense when you look at it honestly. DeMarvion Overshown is the most talented linebacker on the roster, but he has dealt with serious knee injuries in back-to-back seasons and enters 2026 in the final year of his contract. There is nothing guaranteed about his availability or his future in Dallas beyond this year. Logan Wilson was released this offseason. Kenneth Murray departed after an underwhelming season that never found consistency. Christian Parker's 3-4 base scheme demands physical, intelligent, and versatile linebackers who can process information quickly, fill gaps with authority against the run, and drop into coverage without becoming a liability on passing downs. Josiah Trotter fits that profile with legitimate room to develop into a starter. The front office showed interest at the combine, and a top 30 visit confirms that interest is not casual. It is serious. And if Dallas pulls the trigger, how does Cowboys Nation respond on that Sunday in Philadelphia when Josiah lines up across the field from his brother? That is a storyline this league has genuinely never produced before, and it is sitting right there on the table waiting to happen. 2 prospects, 2 completely different profiles. Ticeman addressing the single biggest positional weakness on this roster with rare athletic ability and the kind of football instincts NFL evaluators spend entire careers searching for. Josiah Trotter bringing a last name that splits this fan base before he takes a single professional snap, attached to a personal football story of resilience and adaptability that demands serious evaluation entirely on its own merits. If you had 1 first-round pick today and had to choose between them, which direction do you go? Let us know in the comments, because this is the conversation this fan base needs to be having right now. Jonathan Bullard is not the type of name that was ever going to dominate a news cycle. 32 years old, entering his 11th NFL season, on his 7th professional team. When you write that sentence out, it reads like another veteran at the back end of a serviceable career trying to squeeze out 1 more year of production and a paycheck. And maybe that is a fair surface read for most people who scroll past the transaction wire without digging deeper. But there's a layer to this particular signing that completely reframes the contract the moment you understand it. And it tells you something genuinely important about what Brian Schottenheimer is prioritizing as he tries to rebuild not just the personnel on this defense, but the identity and culture of the entire unit. Bullard signed with the Dallas Cowboys on what would have been his grandmother Joyce's birthday. She was a lifelong Cowboys fan. She passed away before she ever got to see her grandson play in the stadium she loved, wearing the star she cheered for her entire life. For Jonathan Bullard, this was not just a one-year, $2.5 million contract to fill a rotation spot on a defensive line that needs veteran depth. It was personal in a way that very few NFL signings ever are. That kind of motivation, the kind that comes from somewhere deeper than money or market value or scheme fit, the kind that gets a player out of bed earlier and keeps him in the film room longer, is exactly what a head coach trying to change the culture of a locker room wants walking through the building every single day. Let's be honest about what Bullard brings on the field, because the personal story is meaningful, but the football still matters. He was a third-round pick of the Chicago Bears in 2016, and over 11 seasons he built a reputation as exactly the type of player teams depend on without giving nearly enough recognition. In 3 seasons with the Minnesota Vikings, he played 46 games with 38 starts, recording 108 tackles and 15 tackles for loss. Consistent, reliable production from a defensive lineman who understood his role within the rotation and executed it professionally every week. In 2025 with the New Orleans Saints, he appeared in 15 games and added 26 tackles and 4 tackles for loss. Not dominant, dependable. Over his entire career, 131 games played, 247 career tackles, 6.5 sacks, and 3 playoff appearances. That is a player who has been trusted in meaningful moments across multiple organizations and knows how to function in high-pressure environments without the mental fragility that can undermine younger players in the biggest games. He arrives in Dallas at a moment when the defensive line is in genuine transition and the rotation needs exactly the kind of veteran anchor he provides. The Cowboys have made aggressive moves this offseason to address the entire defensive front. Rashawn Gary came from Green Bay to anchor the pass rush with legitimate star power. Otito Ogbonnia strengthens the interior and adds a different physical dimension. Tyrus Wheat was added for versatility and depth across multiple alignments. Now Bullard slots into the rotation as the veteran presence who has seen everything an NFL offensive scheme can throw at a defensive front over the course of a long season. More than that, he has played in 7 different organizational cultures over 11 years. He knows what a winning locker room looks and sounds like from the inside. He knows what a losing one feels like when the disconnect starts to spread. And he knows the difference between a player showing up for a paycheck and a player showing up because the work genuinely means something to him. That is the kind of voice Schottenheimer wants present for younger players on a defense that is going to be leaning on draft picks and developing talent throughout the 2026 season. Bullard is the veteran glue that holds a rotation together while the high-end talent develops around him. And you cannot put a straight number on what that provides in a building still trying to establish its new identity. That brings us to the move generating the loudest buzz from people who actually study value in the free agent market and the quietest buzz from everyone else. When the Cowboys announced the signing of Cobie Durant, most people scrolled straight past it. An unfamiliar name on a modest contract, a cornerback coming from a team that had moved on from him as a full-time starter. It looked at first glance exactly like the kind of depth signing you make and forget about by the time training camp opens. But some analysts looked harder, and what they found was something considerably more interesting than a simple depth piece. Fox Sports named Cobie Durant the best under-the-radar signing of the entire 2026 NFL free agency period. Not in the NFC, not in the conference, the entire league. When a national platform makes that call about a player most fans cannot recognize on sight, you owe it to yourself to understand the reasoning before dismissing it. Durant's path into professional football is one of the more compelling origin stories in this draft pipeline's recent history. He did not come from a Power 5 program with NFL scouts in the building every other weekend. He played at South Carolina State, an HBCU competing at the FCS level, which means the exposure is limited, the scouting infrastructure is thinner, and the prospect has to do significantly more with significantly less attention pointed his way. Durant was a two-time All-Meek selection and an FCS All-American in 2021, but the questions heading into the pre-draft process were always about size. At 5 feet 11 and 181 pounds, he does not fit the prototype that NFL front offices have historically chased at cornerback. He was the kind of prospect who gets lost in the shuffle when bigger, flashier names from bigger programs dominate the pre-draft conversation and the media cycle. At the 2022 NFL Combine, Durant responded to the size concerns the only way an undersized prospect can respond. He ran a 4.3840, the fifth fastest among all cornerbacks at that combine. Analysts noted at the time that Durant played with a confidence and competitiveness that consistently outpaced what his physical measurements suggested on paper. The Los Angeles Rams agreed enough to select him in the 4th round at pick 121. He produced immediately, finishing his rookie season with 3 interceptions returned for 151 yards, which led the entire NFL in interception return yardage. In his second year, he earned 9 starts. By years 3 and 4, he was a full-time starter in the Rams secondary. In 2025, he matched his career high with 3 interceptions, added 40 tackles, 7 passes defended, and his second pick 6. That is not a depth profile. That is a starting caliber NFL cornerback who got squeezed out by cap restructuring, not by declining performance. The Cowboys signed him for $1.5 million guaranteed, with incentives pushing the total value to $5.5 million. The assessment from Fox Sports was direct. Durant does not just fill a need in the slot. At that contract number, on that structure, he improves the entire back end of Dallas's defense while giving the front office enormous positional flexibility heading into training camp competition. And when you combine this move with the fact that Darian Kendrick, also from the Los Angeles Rams, signed with Dallas just days earlier, a pattern becomes impossible to ignore. 2 cornerbacks, same team, same offseason, brought in specifically to repair the most consistently exploited unit on Dallas's defense over the past 2 seasons. That is not coincidence. That is targeted evaluation done right. Someone the Cowboys front office did serious homework on the Rams secondary, identified 2 players whose market value was being suppressed despite legitimate production, and moved on both of them before anyone else in the league recognized what was sitting there available. If Durant delivers in Dallas what his tape in Los Angeles showed he is capable of, this is the kind of signing that looks like genius in November and seems completely obvious in retrospect by the time the playoffs arrive. Pull back now and look at what the Cowboys have actually done this offseason in its full totality, because the complete picture is considerably more impressive than any single individual move. Brian Schottenheimer took over a defense that was statistically broken, culturally adrift, and lacking in every area that matters most in the modern NFL. He spent this offseason addressing it with clear purpose and genuine structure. Rashawn Gary to anchor the pass rush with proven star-level ability. Jalen Thompson on a 3-year deal to lead the safety position with experience and leadership. P.J. Locke to add competition and depth behind Thompson and push the room. Otito Ogbonnia to strengthen the interior defensive line with size and leverage. Tyrus Wheat for positional versatility across multiple front alignments. Kobe Durant to improve the cornerback room on a value contract that gives the front office room to maneuver. Darian Kendrick as a second proven cornerback addition from a respected system with playoff experience. And Jonathan Bullard to complete the defensive line rotation with veteran presence, football intelligence, and a personal investment in this particular team that goes beyond anything a contract can capture. That is more than half a dozen meaningful defensive additions in a single offseason, each one targeting a specific, identifiable deficiency from 2025, each one fitting a clearly defined role within Christian Parker's scheme and Schottenheimer's broader vision for what this defense needs to become. Schottenheimer has been explicit about what he wants in this building. Smart, communicative, versatile players who can execute within multiple fronts, shift between 3-4, nickel, and shell coverages within a single game plan, and communicate across formations in real time without breaking down mentally when the plan changes. That requires football intelligence that does not appear in highlight packages. Bullard brings 11 years of it accumulated across 7 organizations. Durant brings 5 seasons in a Rams system that demands exactly that kind of cerebral, detail-oriented approach to playing cornerback in the NFL. Thompson brings the leadership credibility of a player who has won in meaningful games against real competition. This is not a collection of available bodies filling roster spots before the draft. This is a deliberate attempt to change the intellectual and cultural DNA of a Dallas defense that spent 2025 making the wrong mental errors at the absolute worst possible moments. With 2 first-round picks approaching in the draft, the next phase of this rebuild is about to begin in earnest. Ticeman at safety would address the most critical positional void on this roster in a single selection, bringing both the athletic ceiling and the football instincts to immediately change how opposing offenses game plan against Dallas. Josiah Trotter at linebacker would fill the gap left by departures and injury history in that room, while adding the kind of player whose resilience, adaptability, and motor fit precisely what Parker is asking from every linebacker in his system. Both players represent bets on youth and athleticism to complement the veteran experience and proven production the free agency additions already provide. Neither pick would be a reach. Both would make immediate sense within the structure being built here. The Cowboys are not rebuilding blindly. They know what broke in 2025. They know what they already have that can carry forward. And the moves being made right now, in the quiet spaces between the headline transactions that dominate the conversation, suggest they know exactly how to connect those 2 points in a way that produces real results when September arrives. This is what a structured rebuild looks like from the inside. It does not always announce itself with a move that stops the scroll or dominates the sports radio conversation for a week. It happens in the background, in the combine workouts, in the top 30 visits, and the value contracts, and the deliberate decisions about who walks through the locker room door and why and what they represent to the players already inside. The Cowboys are doing this work right now. The defense that shows up in 2026 is going to look considerably different from the one that limped through last season. The foundation is stronger than it appears from the outside. The pieces are connecting in ways that will become clear the moment the pads go on and the real competition begins. This is still the Dallas Cowboys. The standard never changed. And if these moves tell you anything, it is that the people responsible for building this roster have not forgotten what that standard requires. They are building toward it right now, one deliberate, purposeful, overlooked move at a time.